Hi there, eToro. It is Monday the 12th of June, and that means it's time to take a look at what moved the markets last week. It was a very quiet week last week in terms of macro data. If you look on screen, this is all the macro data, the major macro data that came out of the US, Europe, UK, and China. It's not a hell of a lot coming out of those markets last week. Probably the most interesting of these is the initial jobless claims number that we got on Thursday of last week, showing that the labor market continues to become weaker. We can see that the number of jobless claims came in significantly higher than was expected by analysts. Once again, just emphasizing how quiet last week was. If we look at the week from the 5th of June through to the 11th of June, you can see that no companies in my portfolio or popular stocks in eToro besides NEO reported earnings. So indeed, a very quiet week. However, I did want to touch on the fact that I closed my position in Netflix. I still think that Netflix is the leader in its particular market, streaming video, obviously, and I think that recent changes to the business are going to reap rewards over time. However, the company just isn't as cheap as it once was. For those of you that have been watching the stock for a while, you would have seen it drop below the $200 mark and has now jumped above the $400 mark. And if we look at the numbers, revenue is still growing nicely, net profit is still growing quite nicely. The expected EPS growth for the next few years is decent. However, the price of the stock has definitely gone up in anticipation of the changes that the company has made and the future success of those changes. So I've taken my money out for now. So if the stock market drops and the price of Netflix drops along with it, I'll be more than happy to consider Netflix once again. Since things have been so quiet through the last week, I did want to touch on a couple of stocks that have done very well through the past month or so. Palantir is one such company. You can see there's been quite a large run-up in the stock price. And in part, this is down to expectations that the market and investors have about how Palantir can use AI across its huge data sets to squeeze a little bit more value out of their products. Now, I'm sure that this is something that Palantir can indeed do, but I'd like to see a little bit more evidence of this at an implementation level, not just sales and marketing kind of stuff. However, I do think that the stock price was significantly undervalued, so I'm happy to see the appreciation that we've seen through the past month or so. Another company that's done very well through the past month is TWLO, and that's for a few reasons. TWLO is not a new company. They are the world's leader in CPaaS, which I don't think anyone really knows about unless you're a giant nerd. But they provide a communication platform as a service. They allow people to build applications and use their services through application code, like to make telephone calls and to send text messages, etc. TWLO has had a very tough time, even though their products are very, very strong and their customer base is quite loyal. They've had some trouble turning a meaningful profit in a reliable way over a long time frame. It looks like they're getting quite close to doing this now, but it looks as though at least one group of investors, so the activist investor Legion Partners, thinks that there is a lot more juice that they can squeeze, and so has begun influencing TWLO in various ways, and I think that we'll see more of this in the months and quarters to come. Two big changes that Legion Partners has been pushing for are changes to the executive team, but also for TWLO to get rid of those products that it's built either organically or grown through acquisitions that don't really fit the core business and are pulling focus away from that core business, hampering TWLO's ability to make profit reliably. We've seen two such sales fairly recently. The first is that TWLO's sold off their Value First business to a company called Tanla, and a company called 𝐂𝐨, a listed company too, has bought TWLO's Internet of Things division, which kind of is an adjacent technology to TWLO's core business, but isn't exactly CPaaS. The market is obviously quite optimistic about this refocused core business under the direction of the activist investors, and so the stock price has run quite nicely for TWLO through the past month or so. Another interesting piece of news that drove up the price of Warner Brothers Discovery and a few other streaming platforms is that Amazon, like Netflix and Disney before that, is adding an ad tier to its Prime Video streaming service. For those of you that don't know, Amazon is one of the largest advertising businesses in the world. I think in the US, they are third behind Facebook and Google. They've grown very quickly and they've taken a huge market share. I believe that Warner Brothers Discovery in the long term will be a very successful company. They just need to eat through the debt that they've inherited as part of their merger. And the hope here is that Amazon's Prime Video streaming service, although a competitor to Warner Brothers Discovery, will get more eyeballs on their content, increasing the licensing costs that platforms like Amazon will have to pay Warner Brothers Discovery. Now this week is going to be anything but a boring week when it comes to macro data. I've got a few of the highlights on screen. We're getting inflation data out of Germany, the US, and we can see that the expectations here are that CPI year on year within the US is expected to land at 4.1%. We're also going to get the PPI number, so a leading indicator of inflation out of the US. And on Friday, we will also be seeing the CPI data, inflation data out of the EU region. In addition to this, we're also going to get the GDP number out of the UK on Wednesday, and probably the most anticipated event this week will be the meeting that's going to happen on Wednesday in the US. So the Fed is going to give their interest rate decision where they're expected to pause for this meeting, but they will also talk about what they might do through the next and following meetings. Thursday is also going to be quite a big day. We're going to get a lot of macro data around retail sales, jobless claims out of the US, and we're going to get the ECB's interest rate decision. So one hell of a busy week when it comes to macro data out of the leading economies this week. All right, like I said, short and sweet video for this week. I'll speak to you soon. Have a good one. Goodbye.